Good evening, everyone. How are you this fine evening? Let me get my channel Texas set up so I can see you guys. There we go. Hello, Paula. Hello, Mary Jo. I hope you all ready for chapter 17 and 18. Oh, it has gotten so good. It sure tickles me to get into this chapter tonight, and I'm glad to see you all here. Appreciate it very much. And I came on a little early so we could chit-chat just a little bit. Not too long, just a couple minutes early. Just a couple. And I put up on the live so people can listen to a little bit of last week's. I put that up on the live as a little trailer, about 2 minutes, and I think it was confusing for some people. So, hi Sarah, how are you, honey? Good to see you. Glad you're here. It's getting exciting, isn't it? We are halfway through the book, more than halfway. Oh yeah, more than halfway, and I think we're at where the book peaks, and it's getting good. Good. I'm glad to hear that. I came on just a little early, so I want to give others a chance to get in here. I'm going to go ahead and pick our prayer card to say before we get going. Ooh, I knocked my book over. Oh, that's all right. Yeah, put the prayer card there. Okay, let's get started. I want to welcome everyone to Starting Now. It is our book read that we are doing for the book club. And if you want to join the book club, go over and check out that live that we did today for the book club. And there's a short story in there that I know you're going to love, The Magic of March. So I hope you all listen to that. And let's say tonight's prayer. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her. Luke 1:45. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her. Luke 1:45. What an awesome prayer for tonight. I love that. And here we go, chapter 17. Saturday morning, with bright sunshine streaming into her bedroom window, Libby glanced at the digital readout of the clock next to her bed and groaned. Her eyes stung from lack of sleep. Tossing aside her blankets, she crawled out of bed and brewed herself a cup of strong coffee. Philip had called 3 times. She hadn't answered her phone or listened to the messages. He was a great guy and she enjoyed his company, but he was a distraction. After her last disastrous job interview, Libby had decided she needed to focus. The interview with Alice Rabb kept playing through her mind. It showed like an old-time silent movie, the frames flickering before her. No way around it. She had blown her best chance at getting a job. After waiting for months for an appointment like this, she had sabotaged herself. Libby no longer knew who she was, the determined, dedicated attorney, or the volunteer who loved babies but couldn't make it to a interview on time. Libby wondered what her mother would think of her now, and she could only imagine the damage she had done to her relationship with Robin. After standing under a cold shower for several minutes, she was awake enough to face the day. With errands to run, she left her condo at 8, determined to finish as quickly as possible and be back before noon. She needed to talk to Philip and explain, difficult as it was, sure to be, that she couldn't be involved with him. At 10, she stopped by the yarn store. Libby hoped Lydia would be able to update her on what had happened. She had taken Ava to lunch. She hadn't managed to get through to the young teen, but perhaps Lydia had succeeded where she had failed. The more Libby thought about Ava, the stronger the urge was to take the girl under her wing and help her. She was so young and vulnerable. Libby couldn't help worrying about what would become of her. Apparently, her grandmother was completely oblivious. Both Lydia and Casey were at the yarn store when Libby arrived. She hadn't brought her knitting because she feared that, too, had become a distraction from her job search. "Hi, Libby," Casey called out, waving her arm from the back of the shop. Already the shop was crowded with customers, and Lydia and her sister Margaret were preoccupied. Libby walked to the back of the room to join Casey. "You're certainly in a good mood," Libby said when Casey beamed her a huge smile. The teenager patted the chair next to her, welcoming Libby's company. "Mom's taking me school shopping tomorrow. I'm using the money I earned helping in the shop." Libby sat down next to her. "Have you seen Ava lately?" Casey nodded. "Yeah, she was here yesterday." "Did she say anything?" Casey set aside her crocheted project. "About the talk you had with her?" Libby nodded. "Not really. How'd it go?" Casey leaned forward, eagerly anticipating the details. "We did talk a little, but unfortunately not much. When I asked her about it all, she said she enjoyed her lunch. That was only somewhat encouraging." "Did she mention when she'd be visiting the shop again?" Libby could casually drop by at the same time. If she continued to develop the relationship, she might be able to convince Ava to make a doctor's appointment. She could accompany the young teen and pay for the visit, if Ava was willing. Libby would offer to go with her when she told her grandmother about the pregnancy. The point was, Ava couldn't ignore the obvious for much longer. Decisions had to be made, and Libby wanted to be Ava's advocate, wanted to help her deal with the complexities of her situation. Besides, someone needed to find out if Ava continued to be sexually active and warn her that there could be other consequences. The bell chimed as someone either left or entered the shop. Libby didn't pay much attention until Casey said, "Libby, isn't that your doctor friend?" Libby whirled around, and sure enough, Philip was inside. A good yarn, looking about as uncomfortable as a man in a shop full of women could get. His gaze shot straight to her. His eyes narrowed as he made his way to the back of the store. Even if it meant winning the Washington State Lottery, Libby couldn't have spoken a word. Her mouth was as dry as a sand dune. She wanted to know what he was doing here. It soon became obvious he had come looking for her. She groaned inwardly. She wasn't quite ready to face him. "Did you turn your cell off?" he asked, pulling out a chair and sitting down. I might have." She knew darn well that she had. Fishing inside her purse, she made a show of looking and then dropping it back inside. I left you several messages, Philip told her. I I wasn't in the mood to talk. Maybe he'd take the hint that she wasn't ready now, either. I tried phoning this morning, he said, and then noticed Casey. Hello again, he added, apparently remembering her from their elevator ride together. Casey was all smiles. Libby, you're worse than my grandma. She has a cell phone too, but she always forgets to turn it on. Where's your friend? Philip asked Casey. He was concerned about Ava too. I asked her to come this morning, but she said her grandmother wouldn't let her. She had to clean the house. What was it about a handsome man that prompted women to divulge information? Libby had asked about Ava too, and Casey hadn't said a word about her grandmother keeping her home for chores. Philip looked back to Libby. Have you had lunch? Other than her early morning coffee and a glass of orange juice, Libby hadn't eaten solid food all day. She wasn't the least bit hungry, but they needed to talk, and the sooner she got this over with, the better. Not yet. Good. Have lunch at the French cafe, Casey urged. The food is fabulous, especially the croissants and the soup. Mom orders the soup almost every day. Sounds good to me, Philip said. As if connected to a puppet string, Livy automatically stood and followed him out of the store, pausing only long enough to say goodbye to Lydia and Margaret. Have you tried the French cafe before? He asked, conversationally, placing his hand on the small of Livy's back as they crossed the street. Oh, a time or two. Casey's right, the food is great. Then let's go there. It's close and convenient, and I'm famished. Once inside the cafe, Philip ordered a club sandwich and a small salad, and 2 large peanut butter cookies. Livy ordered a cup and the ginger carrot soup. That's all? He asked when she completed her order. I don't have much of an appetite. He paid for their food, and then they carried their number to the empty tables outside the restaurant where they could eat al fresco. Until they sat down at an umbrella-covered table, Libby hadn't noticed what a glorious day it was. Late July in the Pacific Northwest generally had nice weather. A breeze blew off Elliott Bay, and even though there were several blocks from the waterfront, Libby smelled a hint of the salt in the air. The waterfront would be crowded with tourists. 2 or 3 large cruise ships were in port, adding to the bustling activity. A plane flew above them with the banner that advertised a life insurance company. I apologize for not answering your calls, but like I said, I wasn't in the mood to talk, she said, keeping her hands in her lap. She avoided eye contact, too. Philip reached for his iced tea and took a deep swallow. Completely relaxed, he leaned against the back of the chair and crossed his long legs. I wanted to hear about the interview. I was late, and frankly, it couldn't have gone much worse. Now Robin is avoiding me, although I doubt that she's tried to call. Curious, she reached for her cell and scrolled down the list of recent calls. Robin's name did not appear, but that didn't surprise Libby. She's upset with me, but then I can't really blame her. So what happened? The twins. She stopped and shook her head. Really, what was the point of trying to explain? Bottom line is, she had gotten sidetracked. Even now, Libby couldn't believe she had allowed that to happen. I know all about the 3 sets of twins, Philip said. I want to know what happened at the interview. Just thinking about it made her chest tighten. That bad? Worse. Time got away from me, and I didn't have any choice but to show up in what I was. After arriving late, I never got my balance back. I was flustered and inarticulate. It was dreadful. Even telling him embarrassed her tenfold. To his credit, he did look sympathetic. It might be a little comfort to you now, but thank you for your help in the nursery. It was like a madhouse, 3 sets of twins. Frankly, I don't know what we would have done without you. Libby managed a weak smile. His appreciation did little to convince. It should have. The interview was important. This is my livelihood. I don't know what's happened to me over the last few months. I hardly know who I am any longer. I missed an important interview because I was rocking babies. That's insane. I'm spending half my time in a yarn store knitting. In the meantime, I'm going through my savings at an alarming rate. I need a job. You'll find one. Oh, how confident he sounded. Not at this rate, I won't. I've allowed far too many distractions in my life. She bounced the side of her hand against the tabletop. That's got to end. I have to focus back on track. Libby, you're being too hard on yourself. He leaned forward and gently squeezed her upper arm. It is as bad as all that. It was one interview. She pulled back. Philip might think he was helping, but he wasn't. He didn't know her well enough to realize this irresponsible behavior was not normal for her, nor did he appreciate how angry she was with herself. Their lunch arrived, and Philip immediately reached for his sandwich. It was cut into fours, each secured with a fancy toothpick with a frilly, colorful, cellophane top. Elegant for a cafe, Libby mused. She tasted her soup, and it was delicious. Well, at least her taste buds hadn't gotten depressed along with everything else. Had about as much zip as a slug. Her head throbbed, and she longed to curl into a tight ball and sleep. What she would give to put all of this behind her and simply sleep. Philip had eaten half of his sandwich before he paused. I didn't get dinner last night and was starving. He looked down at the plate and then at Libby's. All right, why the glum face now? I get that you messed up, but you need to pick yourself up and move on, right? If she had had more sleep and her wits about her, she might have been able to sidestep his question. Frankly, she didn't have the energy. I don't have a lot of, and after the stunt I pulled with botched interview, I'm afraid I've lost a good one. Oh, stop beating yourself up. Don't you understand? She losing patience with him. This is exactly the wake-up call I needed. What do you mean? Frowning, he pushed the empty plate aside. She exhaled and decided the best way to deal with him was to be straightforward. He was the type of man who appreciated the truth. I think it might be best if we don't see each other for a while. He stared back at her blankly, as if he hadn't heard a word she had said. Is that what you want, Libby? He asked after several moments. She didn't know anymore, so she avoided the question. I'm not the woman I used to be, and the woman I'm becoming is frightening me. What's that got to do with you and me? Everything, don't you see? I can't be seeing you. A relationship is a distraction. I can't deal with this right now. I've got to find work. I love being an attorney, and I'm good at it. Getting back to work has got to be my focus. He stared at her long and hard. If you're having trouble finding work, Why not set up your own practice? What does it have to be with a big firm? Libby started to argue and quickly closed her mouth. All these months, and not once has she considered opening her own practice. Actually, that was an excellent idea and worthy of consideration. Still, it didn't change matters between Philip and her. You're a very nice person, but you aren't interested, he finished for her. No problem. I got the message. In other words, thanks, but no thanks. That wasn't it at all, but she didn't want to argue with him. Not you, it's me, right? He grinned, but his face lacked the hint of amusement. Not the most original line, but it works. He scooted back his chair and stood up. Best of luck to you, Libby. I enjoyed being with you, but I think you're smart to end it now before either of us invests any more time in this relationship. She started to say something, but he walked away. Libby longed to call him back, but swallowed the words. He was right. It was best to end it now. That didn't explain why she longed to race after him and tell him she had made a mistake. For a long time she sat, staring into space, and wondered what she had just done. Already her heart was her that she would regret it. Unsure how much time had passed, Libby reached for her purse in order to leave. Paused. Thinking about Philip's suggestion, all morning she had been telling herself she needed to focus. And there was no like the present. Reaching for a small notepad inside her, compiled a list of what she would need. Such a venture would be expensive. It wasn't like she was rolling in the cash. When she was first laid off, she had a hefty savings account, mainly because she had spent all her time at the office. Only rarely did she take the opportunity to shop. And when she did, it was mostly online. Her severance package carried her for a while, but now she was digging her savings, which was going really fast. Soon she would be forced to sell some of her investment stocks, and with the market so low, she would suffer a loss. If she set up her own shop, the first person she would hire would be Sarah, her paralegal. She would need someone organized and efficient, and Sarah was certainly that. The two of them made a great team. Maybe it was possible. Certainly it was considering. Her mother used to say that maybe she was meant to be late for that interview. As soon as she was home, she would contact Robin and bounce the idea off her. Libby's shoulders shrugged, slumped forward. She decided whether to contact her friend or wait. She decided to wait. If she didn't hear from Robin by Monday morning, then Libby would have her answer as to how pissed off her friend actually was. And that is the end of chapter 17. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Poor Libby. I mean, I am shocked that she broke up with Dr. Philip Stone. That I did not see that play coming in there. So that was kind of a shocker. But I'm going to take a quick drink and we will go right in to chapter 18. I'll be right back. How many of you heard the sneak peek on chapter 18? It does sound good also. Little disheartening about the grandmother's attitude, but we'll see what happens here. Stop eating so much. You're... Yes, Grandma. Ava hung her head, not wanting to look her in the face. Left you? Keeping her eyes down, Ava nodded. Her grandmother had been in a bad mood all day. She left the table and took the dirty dishes with her. Jackson carried his own plate to the sink and sent her a sympathetic look. Their grandmother wasn't normally home on Sunday afternoons. She was usually with her friends at the VFW club or the local tavern. Most of the time, she had left mid-afternoon and didn't return until just before dinner time. Ava wished her grandmother was still with her friends instead of being out of sorts and snapping at her and Jackson. That morning, Jackson had gone to church with Peter from next door. Jackson said it would be all right if she wanted to go too, but Ava didn't feel well. She didn't most days. She'd known something was wrong nearly all summer, but until her lunch with Libby, she hadn't known this. There was a baby inside of her. A baby. Ava didn't know what she was going to do. If her grandmother found out, she'd be a whole lot more than cranky. According to their grandmother, Ava's mother had been a problem child. She wanted to be sure that Jackson and Ava were good and grew up to be decent individuals. Ava didn't know what to be a decent individual, but she had a fairly good idea that it didn't mean having a baby when she was only 13. Ava washed the dishes. Her grandmother lit a cigarette and sat in front of the television and watched a Mariners baseball game. Ava wiped down the countertop and put the leftover food away. Jackson was playing basketball with Peter, who had a hoop in his driveway. She watched them through the kitchen window for a while, and when she finished cleaning up, she went into her bedroom. It was quiet there. She really didn't care about watching the Mariners. Ava needed to think. She didn't know what she was going to do about the baby. Her grandmother thought she was eating too much. Ava had seen pregnant women, and some of them got really big up front. She didn't know what would happen if the baby grew that big inside of her. Lifting the edge of her mattress, Ava reached for a piece of paper Libby Morgan had given her with the phone number written on it. She pulled out the folded slip and stared for several minutes. Libby had told Ava she could phone her any time. Maybe Libby would know what to do. Maybe she could help her. Her grandmother's voice echoed down the hallway. Stupid Mariners. The local team was losing, and her grandmother's mood would turn even worse if they did. Ava decided it would be best in her bedroom. Sitting on top of her bed, she raised her knees and buried her face there. The baby in her stomach was probably the reason her ankles had been swollen most of the summer. I'm going out for a while, her grandmother called. Ava relaxed. If her grandmother went to the VFW, then she wouldn't be upset about the Mariners. She'd probably gone until it was dark, or even later. About 10 seconds later, the front door closed. Ava waited a few more minutes and then crept into the kitchen where the phone was. It was an old-fashioned one that was attached to the wall. After looking at the phone number for a long time, she memorized it. She returned the sheet to its original hiding place. It took her minutes to gather up the courage to phone Libby. Finally, she punched in the phone numbers, closed her eyes, and waited. Hello. Just the sound of Libby's voice panicked her. Ava slammed down the receiver. Her grandmother had something that canceled their phone number on caller ID. So Ava didn't need to worry that Libby would be calling her back. Her heart raced and she broke out in a cold sweat. Ava really did feel sick to her stomach. Her grandma said she was getting lazy, and Jackson said she wasn't any fun because all she did was stay in her room. He would too if he felt the way she did. She knew pregnant women went to see a doctor, but Ava didn't have the money for a doctor visit. Even if she did, there was always the chance her grandmother would find out. She couldn't risk her grandmother learning about the baby inside of her. Having a baby was dangerous. She might even die. She pressed her hand on her stomach and bit into her lip. Another 30 minutes passed before she found the courage to dial Libby's phone number a second time. Hello? Ava didn't speak. She couldn't. Her throat had closed up on her, and when she tried to talk, nothing came out but a squeaking noise that sounded like a baby bird or something else small and helpless. After a moment, Ava replaced the receiver. She liked Libby. Libby had taken her to a sit-down restaurant. It had been Ava's first time ever in a restaurant where you didn't order off a menu on the wall and the waitress came to the table. Only she had Libby that. Returning to her bedroom, Ava lay down on top of her bed with her arms wrapped around her stomach. She wanted to close her eyes, but if she went to sleep now, she'd wake up in the middle of the night. Hated that. It was at nighttime that she missed her mother the most. Ava's mother had been a lot like her grandmother, only younger. What Ava really missed was the apartment where she had had friends and neighbors she knew and trusted. Since moving in with her grandmother, Ava had begun attending a new school. The only friend she had was Casey. After a while, Ava got up and went outside. She sat on the porch and watched her and Peter shoot baskets. Both boys ignored her. Peter's mother came out with a plate of cookies. Peter was a child, and Jackson said he was spoiled. Her brother was jealous. Ava didn't blame him. For once in their lives, they would be like for someone to spoil them. No one ever had baked cookies for her and Jackson. You okay, Jackson asked, wandering over to her. She shrugged. Yeah. Peter's mother walked across the yard to Ava. Would you like a cookie, Ava? She asked. She can't, Jackson answered. Grandma said she's getting fat. You're not fat, Mrs. Armstrong insisted. One cookie isn't going to hurt you. Okay. Ava reached for the cookie and held it. She didn't eat it right away, but she would later. She would take tiny bites and savor each one. Mrs. Armstrong returned to the house, and the boys went back to playing basketball. Peter was on the junior high team, and Jackson wanted to be too. Tryouts weren't for a long time yet, so he had plenty of time to practice. Hi, Paula. How are you, hon? After a few minutes, Ava went inside the house again. She stared at the phone on the wall, and she couldn't decide to talk to Libby or not. Instead, she got out her knitting, sat down with it in front of the television cable, so all they could get were the local channels. The reception wasn't good, but they watched it because it was all they had. Nothing good was on anyway, so Ava concentrated on her knitting. She wondered if Casey would still be her friend if she found out about the baby. When school started, everyone would think she had gotten really fat over the summer. She hoped No one would guess she would. On second thought, maybe she wouldn't go to school. Maybe she'd wait until her grandmother left for work and then come back to the house. She'd rather do that than have the kids tease her about being fat. After knitting several rows, Ava set the knitting aside. Before her courage left her, she reached for the phone again and dialed the number Libby had given her. Instead of saying hello this time, Libby said, "Ava, is that you?" Her eyes... Libby knew it was her phoning. "Please, don't hang up." "Okay," she managed to whisper. "Are you all right?" Yes, she felt crummy, but she always did, so it wasn't any different from any other day. "Good," Libby sounded relieved. "I'll be at the yarn store on Tuesday," Ava told her. "So will I," Libby promised. That was all the reassurance Ava needed. Libby would help her. She could trust Libby. Ava was sure of that. Libby would know what she should do. And that takes us to chapter 19. Oh my goodness. Well, at least we know now that Ava knew she was pregnant. So crummy. Wow. But after Libby talking to her in the restaurant, that's when she realized she was pregnant. So, what we learned today in these two chapters is that Libby, with Dr. Philip Stone, felt she needed to focus. I'm blown away too, Mary Jo. Did not see her breaking up with the doctor at all. I didn't see that coming. So I'm pretty shocked about that. Whew. And I'm glad Libby is going to... but I'm kind of like in a limbo right now. The way I thought the book was going totally flipped it on me. So with her breaking up, knowing that Ava didn't know she was pregnant, now it makes sense why she jumped away from the table and yelled, "No, I'm not pregnant." She didn't realize that. So yeah, it's totally taken a different direction than what I expected. So I can't wait till next Wednesday in chapter 19 to find out, is the good doctor and her going to get back together? Or is Libby going to change by helping Ava? So we'll find out next week. I want to thank you for coming in. Debbie McComber, starting now. And please let me know in the comments how much you are enjoying it. Don't forget to give me that beautiful thumbs up for our story. And don't forget to vote on the next book that we will be reading. Till then, I wish you all peaceful dreams and a great, great night. And I'll see you in another live. Thanks, everyone.